We'll give it a little, I don't know, a minute. I know some people are coming from other obligations. So today will be really quick. We're just going to run through peripheral nervous system, which in the past, we got one component here that's new, and in the past we tied in the cranial nerves with what we did last week. So that's why it'll be a shorter instruction today.
Hey, Trevor, quick question. Is this the last part of Practical 2, or is there going to be more information added?
All right, I think we're good. The admission here has slowed a little bit. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be going through peripheral nervous system, and this is going to be relatively quick. So just as usual, you have a list of structures that you can pull up within Canvas. I think I pulled this up ahead of time here. There it is. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you now. All right, can you see that list of structures there? I suppose I should open chat. All right, so we'll work through the cranial nerves, and then we're going to get into the different nerve plexuses of the body. It's not too in-depth this week, and I think you're going to be okay. And in fact, for the cranial nerves, you don't even really need to recognize them anatomically within complete anatomy. You just need to know the number of the nerve, the name, and then its fiber type. So that's whether it's a sensory or a motor or both. Okay? And we'll walk through that in a second through the PowerPoint. So list of structures here up on Canvas. All right. I'm going to do one thing here. All right. All right, so peripheral nervous system, we abbreviate that the PNS. From last time we did central nervous system, the CNS. So now we're talking about everything outside of that. So the organization of the nervous system, we can divide it into central nervous system, which we've covered, and peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system, as you know, is the brain and the spinal cord. So now we're incorporating everything else. The PNS consists of nerve fibers that carry information basically to the CNS and away from the CNS. So we can divide that into the afferent division. And I remember this because afferent starts with an A. So that's information that is going to arrive to the central nervous system. So you can think of info going into the brain. It's arriving. Afferent nerve fibers, like sensory, are going to carry that information. And then we have the efferent division, starts with an E. You can think of that as exiting the central nervous system. Okay, so it's coming away from it. Maybe the brain is sending command to move your arms, control some skeletal muscle. So that's going to be carried out through efferent nerve fibers. So we're going to be focusing on these afferent and efferent nerves today, which make up the peripheral nervous system. As I just mentioned, the afferent division carries information to the CNS. Okay, so if we have just this kind of this standard drawing of the central nervous system here, we take a cross section through the spinal cord in this case. That afferent information arrives through the posterior, or what we call the dorsal part of the spinal cord there. And we'll look at this a little more closely in a bit. And then the information that is exiting from the central nervous system, efferent nerve. So that can be out to some type of an effector, a muscle or a gland. So here, if this is skeletal muscle, this would be a motor neuron, okay? So, oops, yeah, okay, that's good. So Yep, I got a little spelling error there, but arrives and exits. And afferent and efferent make up the peripheral nervous system. Everything in between is central nervous system. All right, so what we're going to be looking at today are those nerves and ganglia. We'll look at a ganglia in a second. That's a clustering of cell bodies. Okay. And the PNS consists of the nerves and those ganglia outside of the brain and spinal cord. Those are CNS. So this is going to include the cranial nerves, and actually it doesn't include cranial nerve 2, although you will learn it, which is the optic nerve, and all of these spinal nerves. So you're going to learn the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves today, and we'll go through those in that order. The main function of the peripheral nervous system is to connect the central nervous system to the limbs and organs. Okay? So that's, we can have internal stimuli, sensory, and then we can be sending messages to those internal organs as well. All right, so let's get going. I mentioned the ganglia up here. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So we can see here, we have a cross section of the spinal cord again, and we said the afferent fibers or neurons are going to carry information to the CNS, okay? And that's going to enter through this dorsal horn or posterior horn of this gray matter here. And what the ganglia is, it's a clustering of cell bodies. So you can picture all these neurons clustering together, but what's kind of different with these afferent neurons that are arriving at the CNS is they have this centrally located cell body, okay? So it's not at the end of the neuron like we typically picture it in this case. Here it's centrally located, so all of those tend to cluster up in one spot. You can imagine if you have tracks of neurons running, then those centrally located cell bodies are all going to pile up. And where those do pile up, we get this structure called ganglion, okay, plural ganglia. Okay. And notice that's only on the dorsal part here. So those afferent neurons that are bringing information from outside into the CNS. And when I say outside, this can be from external, it could be reception like touch, but it could also be sensory from the viscera, like your internal organs, okay? But information that arrives at the CNS, we will see these ganglia. So we'll see something like this. Let's say you're detecting something with your skin. That information is going to arrive via these afferent neurons, okay? And they're going to enter again the back or the posterior part of the spinal cord and enter this posterior horn, dorsal horn, whatever you want to call it, okay? There will be an interneuron in between. You don't need to know that right now. You will for lecture, okay? And then we will exit here from the anterior or ventral horn with an efferent. Efferent exits. Okay? And this we can go out to some type of effector, and that can be skeletal muscle if it's a motor efferent neuron, or maybe it's autonomic, okay, those processes that happen automatically, and that can go to smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or gland to bring about some type of effect. So here we have the cranial nerves that you're going to be responsible for, okay? And I know this looks overwhelming, but here I pulled this from your structure list, I believe. So we have a screen for you with Incomplete Anatomy that shows you these cranial nerves, okay? And you can click on that specific nerve and get information about it, such as what it innervates, for example. But remember, I said at the start of this that you're not responsible for identifying the individual cranial nerves within Complete Anatomy. So while you won't be tested on that, you are responsible for knowing the number. So for example, cranial nerve 1, okay? You're responsible for knowing the structure that innervates, and then the fiber makeup of the nerve. So when we say that, we're talking, is it a sensory neuron? Is it a motor neuron? Or does it have both? Okay. So to help you with that, we have this table here containing the information that you need to know. And I know this looks a little overwhelming, but really I got a couple mnemonic devices here that are going to help you with this information. So you can see they're numbered 1 through 12. Okay? And they all have these different names, and then they have their fiber types, whether they're sensory, motor, or both. And then we give you their function. Okay? Now, to help with this, we have these different mnemonic devices. So what I would do is just with a scratch piece of paper, right when you get your practical or your quiz even, just go ahead and number this out, 1 through 12, and then remember these devices. So the first one I give you is, these are ridiculous, but I think they'll help. Ooh, 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 to touch and feel very good velvet, always heavenly. Okay, and I'll post that in a second. I'll show you within Complete Anatomy. We actually have that written out for you, so you don't have to be scribbling that down right now. So ooh, 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 to touch and feel very good velvet, always heavenly. It's absurd. And then the fiber types, sensory, motor, or both. This one's a little easier to remember. Some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. Okay. So now we'll just dip into a slide from your lecture within Complete Anatomy. If I can stop screen, exit this here. There we go. So here's an actual picture of the slide that you'll see within your lecture within Complete Anatomy. And we have those mnemonic devices there for you. Okay, so we have these cranial nerves numbered out 1 through 12, and then these are written out for you in case you didn't catch those while I just said them. Okay. I think that will be very helpful. So that's the cranial nerves, but you also need to know the spinal nerves in addition to those. You will need to be able to locate these, but I think they're quite a bit easier because they're based upon the vertebrae that they originate from, okay? So review of the spinal cord, we went over this last time, about 45 centimeters long with a 2-centimeter diameter. And what we're keying in now is that these paired spinal nerves emerge from the cord, okay? So now it's gonna be time to identify those. So you can see these here. There's the cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral, okay? Again, I pulled this off of your structures list here. These are some features that you're going to be responsible for identifying. So you got spinal meninges. We went over the meninges last time, right? Those protective layers of the central nervous system. And we said, although we reviewed primarily the ones that surround your brain, we also said that they do cover the spinal cord as well. And we can see those here. Here you have that outer hard dura mater, and then deep to that, the arachnoid mater, and then clinging right to the spinal cord itself, that very fine pia mater. Okay, so we still have those. We have white matter. Remember, that's kind of the consistent pattern that we see within the nervous system is we have a central canal, it's one of yours here, that is surrounded by gray matter, which is made up of cell bodies. And then that is surrounded by white matter, and that's due to those axons that are covered in myelin, that lipid, give it that white appearance. So this is a pattern we see throughout the CNS, and it's consistent all the way up till the brain until we add another outer layer of gray matter, which we call the cortex. So if we dip into Complete Anatomy now, notice these are hyperlinks again for you to access this stuff directly from this PowerPoint. I'm trying to open Complete Anatomy. I just got slow internet today. Very slow. All right, here we go. So now you can see these things and structures we're talking about. Here we can see, click on that, these spinal nerves. And remember we said we have a ventral root and a dorsal root. Where's that? There we go. Okay, so there's front and back. You also see those referred to as anterior and posterior, depending on your text or reference, but they mean the same thing, right? Okay. And then here we can see that dorsal root ganglion. So remember those afferent neurons, clustering of cell bodies there. So they have this unipolar structure. All right. So now let's move on and get into, here's another view of those structures here. So the mouse disappeared. Here we see that posterior. See here, they're calling it posterior instead of dorsal. Remember dorsal fin, like on a dolphin, just means on the back. And then here they're calling it anterior root instead of ventral. Okay. And we can see here, I wanted to mention this earlier, I didn't quite get into it, but we can have somatic sensory, so soma being arising from the body, or visceral, so coming from the internal viscera, the organs. That sensor, it's all sensory information, so that's going to be carried via these afferent neurons into this posterior or dorsal horn. Okay. And then efferent, which exits information, this can be either somatic motor, skeletal muscle, or autonomic functions, those that occur more automatically, right? That we don't have to consciously think about. And those are going to exit from the lateral horn. It's a little projection. Remember we said it looked like a butterfly wing? So from the tip, there we have the motor. And then from this lateral little projection here, that's where that autonomic motor neurons come from. That'll innervate like cardiac muscle or smooth muscle or different glands. Okay. Kicking a dead horse here with this, but I think you'll get it. All right, so now let's turn to those spinal nerves. So you're responsible for knowing the different nerves and plexuses. So a plexus is just a collection of nerves that innervate specific areas or organs. Okay. So you're responsible for the plexuses that are listed below. You have a cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and sacral. Sorry, you also have the brachial. The cervical and the brachial make up are comprised of the cervical nerves here. Okay, so let's work through these. The first thing you need to know is the cervical plexus. So cervical, because it's arising from these cervical vertebrae, meaning neck. And the cervical plexus is C1 through C4. And they innervate the skin and muscle of the neck, shoulder, and arm. Then we have the brachial plexus, and this is from the cervical vertebrae C5 through C8. Okay. Brachial, if you're not familiar, that just means upper arm. Okay. So here we have sensory and motor neurons that go to the chest, the shoulder, and the arm, including the forearm and the hand. All right. We then have thoracic nerves, and these are coming out of they're named for the vertebrae above them. So you have T1 through T12, thoracic vertebrae T1 through T12, thoracic nerves T1 through T12. And these carry somatic sensory and motor, sorry about that, info to the intercostal spaces. So you see these are also made up of intercostal nerves, okay? We have the lumbar plexus made up of the lumbar nerves, L1 through L4. So those are those lumbar vertebrae, which innervate the lower abdominal wall, the groin, and the thighs, and the knees, and the calves. And then we have the sacral plexus, coming from the sacral nerves, They might be dividing this a little differently than we did. But anyway, you need to know L4 through S3, okay? That's going to be our sacral plexus. I pulled this image from the internet just before this. So L4, lumbar 4 through S3, sacral 3, and that's motor control and sensory for the pelvis and the leg, including your foot. Okay. So all that information I just ran through with you is actually available right here and within your PowerPoint. And Mandy was kind enough to put hyperlinks in here directly to your complete anatomy to help with identification. So for example, if we start with cervical plexus, and And if my complete anatomy is willing to open. Anyway, okay, it's telling you the nerves here, SN, obviously spinal nerve. So it's formed by the C1 through C4 spinal nerves, and they innervate the skin and the muscles of the neck, shoulder, and arm. Click on this hyperlink here for cervical plexus, that collection of nerves, and it's going to bring you to that corresponding page within complete anatomy. So now we can look at the nerves of the cervical plexus. Okay? So for example, the first cervical nerve here, and you can identify that. Easy enough. It's the first paired nerves that we see exiting the spinal cord there. Second cervical nerve. Okay. Third cervical nerve. And if we click on that, it's going to tell you what it innervates as well. Okay. So you have these hyperlinks available for all of the different plexuses. So go ahead and use that slide to your advantage. Okay, that's all I got for you today. I said it was quick, and it is. So I think Manny said we'll have the new practical up there very shortly. I think he said either by tomorrow or end of the week. And then next week is actually just going to be a review. So I'll be sitting here. If you have complete anatomy questions, we can pop on and I can run through those with you, but not mandatory. It's just going to be questions if they arise. Okay. And there's a question here, it looks like. I can't hear you, Lee, but hey, Lee, just stay on here and I'll have a chat with you if that sounds good. I'll go ahead and let everybody else go. So we'll see you next week if you got review questions, and take care. Or stick around if you have questions and we can chat.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? It looks like my mic is picking it up.
Lee, I can hear you talking.
Oh, you can hear me talking.
I don't know if you can, but I can.
Okay, thank you for that.
I wanted to hear your answer to the question too.
I don't know. I'll just say. This is all the information for.
Lee, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know if you can hear me.
I don't know what's going on. I can't hear you.
Trevor, can you hear me? Nope, he definitely cannot.